Hey team, this is Nathan from RunDreamAchieve.com. Hope you all are having a great weekend. This video you're going to be seeing on Monday morning, but I want to talk on the differences between a half marathon versus full marathon training. And I had a great question by one of my subscribers who left me a message under the video that I had made about running slow to get faster, and she had asked, I would be really interested in hearing your thoughts on converting a solid half marathon into a strong marathon. Take the example in this video. Someone had run a 73-minute half. How does someone in that position go about converting that into a solid marathon? What workouts would you advise to help them extend marathon paces out over longer periods of time and distances? So great question, Ashley. Most of the time, I think that in terms of the half marathon and marathon, training for those two particular distances are very similar because they're much longer races, much more aerobic races as compared to anaerobic races like the mile, the 2 mile, the 5K, the 10K. Sometimes in terms of trying to take an equivalent, trying to see, okay, say this particular athlete ran a 73-minute half, to get a general estimate of what that individual could run for a full marathon, usually you double the distance, you double that. So double 113 for the half, making that 226, you double that, and then you add on about 6 minutes. So it comes out to around 232 to 233 for a full marathon. As I've said in that particular video, a half marathon and a full marathon are totally different in terms of, obviously, the distances. We know 13.1 miles or versus 26.2 miles, or 21.1 kilometers versus 42.2 kilometers. They're massively different in the fact that it's double the distance. You have to make sure that you're able to sustain pace for longer periods of time. But in terms of what I would do, your first question, how does someone in that position go about converting that into a solid marathon? There is no easy way to guarantee great results in the marathon just by running a solid half marathon. You have to put in the longer runs. I would definitely be doing longer runs as compared to doing, if I was training for a half marathon. You don't need to be doing 32-kilometer long runs or 20-mile long runs for a half marathon, whereas you definitely need to be doing that for a marathon, and preferably even longer. Going out 20 miles out to around 24 miles at the farthest distance will set you up for success for the longer race, for the marathon race. So for the half marathon, I would say, like, even in my own experience, my long runs for the half marathon would be anywhere from around, in past of training, would be anywhere from around 17 miles to about 18 miles. I would cap out around 18 miles. Whereas for the marathon, I would branch, I even went out to as far as 30 miles training for the marathon. So you do have to have relatively high volume to prepare well for the half marathon as well as the marathon. So the major changes I would make for somebody that's run 113 for the half, that's gunning for the marathon and trying to say, in this instance, this individual that ran that 113 is wanting to run under 3 hours, and he definitely, after having run that 113, is reevaluating what he needs to now run, what he needs to now do. Definitely preparing for the full marathon, you need to get that long run, start doing those long runs at a faster pace. And what I talk about, not just easy, long, slow, long runs every single weekend, very up the pace. Like when I was training for the marathon and I'd run 107.06 for the half, the difference that I knew for me to run under 2 hours and 22 minutes, I had to get my shorter distance races like the 10K, the half marathon. I need to get those particular events and be able to run those particular events as fast as I could, and really develop my speed and work on my speed so that I could really prepare well and at least have an indication that I could run very strong over the marathon distance. Once I ran that 1:07:06, I was absolutely certain that I could run under 2 hours and 22 minutes for the marathon. And again, even that 1:07:06, you double that, that's 2:14 plus 6 minutes, that comes out to around 2:21. And again, that's just an estimate, but it's a general good estimate of what you can do for the distance. What workouts would you advise to help them extend marathon paces? The types of workouts that I was doing was 3 times 3 miles on the roads, and oftentimes I would do 3 times 5K. When I got to a point where I could do 3 5K repetitions anywhere from 1540 to 1550 with a 5 to 6 minute rest in between each one of those reps, I knew, and those were the types of workouts I was doing prior to running 2:19 for the marathon. So to convert a strong half marathon to a full marathon and to run well over the marathon distance, yes, you definitely have to get that half marathon to a very competitive time based on your particular goal. You definitely have to start doing long runs. Again, I don't think going out 30 miles is going to get you any better results than doing 20 miles or 22 to 24 miles for a long run for the marathon. For the half marathon, again, you don't need to be doing, you don't need to do long runs 22 to 24 to 25 miles in length, okay? There's only slight differences between training for the half marathon and the marathon in terms of long runs, okay? It's just a few extra miles, but it's how you're setting up those mileage, those long runs, and how you're setting up your weekly volume. That is the determining factor in terms of how fast and how effective you're going to be over the full marathon distance. And that's really universal over any distance. It's, you know, if you're training for the mile and you're training really for a highly anaerobic raw speed type event, it's how you're setting up that weekly volume that's really going to dictate how successful you're going to be at the marathon or the mile distance or the 5K distance or 10K distance. But training for a half marathon and a marathon are not drastically different. It's just for especially the long run has to be longer. And if you want to run well over 26.2 miles versus just 13.1 miles, you're going to have to be very well accustomed to being very efficient at hydrating well, having done that and practiced in practice first, and making sure that you can that you're taking in more calories and taking in more hydration, more fluid during your training. That way, when you get in the race, that you can be very effective over the full marathon distance. A drastic difference between a half marathon and a marathon is the fact that one, it's double the distance, but two, you have to pay attention to your hydration practices in training as well as in the race itself, especially if it's a hot day and your body's going to definitely need more fluid and to be able to take in those extra calories that most of the time athletes are not doing. Even if it's a hot race, you definitely cannot just sip in a marathon as opposed to a half marathon. It's even important in the half marathon because you're sweating so much more, you're going to be losing so much more fluid and sweat that if you neglect that, you're going to run piss poor in the marathon distance as well as the half marathon distance. But trying to convert a great half marathon, and you for the athlete that's run a 1:13 half, that is already somebody that's very highly capable of running a great marathon. But there are, again, it's a lot of things you have to do correctly in order to get that full marathon right. The types of workouts, definitely the longer intervals. When I was training for the half marathon as well as the marathon, key workouts I was doing was 6 times 1 mile repetitions on the track. And when I was at my fittest, I would only give myself 2 minutes rest. I was doing those repetitions between 4 minutes and 44 seconds to 4 minutes and 48 seconds per rep at 6,000 feet altitude with a 2-minute rest in between. This didn't happen immediately. There again, as I talk about in other videos, there's the importance of periodization and gradually increasing the intensity and the volume that you're putting in as you become more anaerobically fit. So to convert well from a half marathon to a full marathon, you have to continue to focus on speed development, period. It doesn't matter if you're training for the mile or you're a marathoner. Always focus on increasing your capability to handle very high levels of lactic acid, and being able to, over time, as you get fitter, clear that more effectively than your competition. And this really plays a key role in the marathon distance, because it's such a long race, and it's a mental race too. So that's why I always harp on training, mental training and visualization, and doing this 10 to 20 minutes every single day over several months, visualizing what you're wanting to do, and training your subconscious mind to guide you where you want to go. And granted, mental training in and of itself, by itself, is not going to guarantee you results. It's the combination of you paying attention to your nutrition, proper rest in between these hard anaerobic workouts, visualization, obviously, but also stressing the anaerobic systems of the body, coupled with equal attention and focus on recovery, and jogging on recovery days, allotting that time to back off and recover from the hard anaerobic workouts you're doing. So over the years, in terms of the half marathon versus the marathon, it took me several attempts to get the marathon right. And even when I ran 2:19, there were still things in that race, on that particular day, that I could have possibly done different, that would have maybe helped me run 2:16 or 2:17 for the distance. But I think in terms of training, the differences between a half marathon versus the full marathon is, one, you have to start running longer for your long runs, as opposed to training for the half marathon. Those long runs have to be, it can't just be long, slow distance every single weekend. If you're going to run, if you've run a decent time for a half marathon, if you want to get the marathon right, you have to spend some time and get comfortable getting uncomfortable, and spending longer periods of time during that long run, varying up the pace. So just for an example, some of the examples of long runs I did training for the marathon, while I was still training mainly for the half marathon, and where I really wanted to get, I ran well for the half, but I really wanted to get that marathon time down, was 20 milers, where I would do 4 miles easy, then I would do 1 mile under 5 minutes, then I would go 4 miles moderate at 160 beats per minute, which was about, when I was very fit, right around 20 seconds slower, 15 to 20 seconds slower than goal race pace. And then I would do 4 miles easy, 1 mile under 5 minutes, and then run the last few miles of that long run at 10 to 15 seconds slower than goal race pace again. And then the last 2 to 3 miles of that long run, I would just jog nice and easy. The following week, I would do, say, a 23 or 24 mile long run at a nice, easy, relaxed pace. The following week, I would do, examples of another type of long run I would do would be like a 24 miler, where I would do 5 miles easy, then 15 miles at 160 beats per minute, which was right around 88 to 92% of my maximum heart rate. When I was very fit, I would be running at that particular effort at around 530 to 535 mile pace at 6,000 feet altitude. And I would do that, a 15-mile segment at that effort, and then a 2 mile to 3 mile jog cool down. So again, there's some, when I talk about varied paces, it's a combination of running at closer to 5K to 10K race pace at specific segments of the long run, relaxed, easy pace during the long run, and closer to like anaerobic threshold, your AT pace, during long runs. So it's varying up the paces of those efforts. So you're giving your body a combination of both very hard anaerobic efforts that you can only hold for a few minutes, anaerobic threshold type effort where you're training closer to a few seconds slower than goal race pace, training at pace, and then training at paces that are much more relaxed that you can obviously sustain for, you know, a couple hours if need be. But it's just a combination of not just running long, slow distance every single weekend that's really going to help athletes prepare better for going from a half marathon versus training for a marathon. Again, the training is similar to both. You know, if you're training for a half marathon, you don't drastically need to change up your training that much for a full marathon, because again, they're similar in the fact that they're both more aerobic type events. It's just the distance. You're doubling the distance. So to convert to run a strong half marathon, you've already run several half marathons and run it well, and you want to run very strong over the full marathon, you again need to focus on consistent effort over several months, consistent, relatively high volume, but more targeted volume, where you're training one VO2 max workout per week, preferably one tempo run per week, anaerobic threshold effort type workout, several easy, relaxed recovery workouts so that you can recover from these hard efforts you're doing. And then again, focusing on that long run, where you're focusing on a combination of training at a percentage of that long run at more of an anaerobic effort, and portions of those long runs at AT effort, and coupled with the next weekend followed by a nice, easy, relaxed long run. So again, it's always, the focus is always on recovery. And then we talk about that 10-day taper, where you go in 10 days out from your big race, relaxed, you know, and motivated. You start dropping your volume 50 to 60%, 10 days out from your big race. You start dropping that volume, dropping the intensity, so that you go into the race feeling more energized and motivated rather than lethargic and tired, because you started dropping your volume out and your intensity 3 weeks out. So I really think that's kind of some of the key strategies I really think that athletes that are trying to convert from training for a half marathon versus a full marathon need to be thinking about. Again, you don't need to drastically make big changes, because the half marathon and marathon are similar. It's just obviously the marathon is double that distance. So you need to continue to train at paces that are far faster than you're trying to race at over the marathon distance. So again, you get the marathon race pace to feel more in control. You're able to clear lactic acid faster than it's building up. You're training the body to burn fat at race pace so that you can conserve carbohydrates and call upon those carbohydrates when you need them most in the marathon, especially during that last 10 kilometers. And continue to focus on nutrition and hydration and practice. What are you doing in terms of your nutrition after you work out? You know, are you taking in enough protein? Are you hydrating well before, during, and after those hard workouts? Are you giving yourself enough rest? There are so many factors that go into perfecting the marathon distance. So it is a tough question to answer, but it's just some of the things that I hope that, Ashley, I hope some of this helps. I know it can be long-winded as well, but there's just so many factors that go into getting the marathon right. Again, I had to train and you know, be willing to fail and be willing to goof it up sometimes. Sometimes you're gonna run far too fast the first few miles. Maybe, you know, in a marathon, it's really going to cost you in the latter stages of the marathon. Try to make those mistakes in training first. Train the body hard anaerobically, allot time to recover from the hard workouts. Give yourself a proper taper. Continue to visualize success. Visualize what you want. And if you do this over a long enough period of time, you're going to succeed. It's all about persistent, consistent action over long periods of time. That will dictate your overall success at the marathon distance. How badly do you want success? And if somebody that's run a 1:13 half has already run that fast for the half marathon, there is no reason whatsoever why that athlete can't eventually get the marathon down and get it close to a perfect effort over several tries, over several years. So I hope that answers your question, Ashley, and anybody else that's run the half marathon is considering the full marathon. Feel free to leave me a comment below if there's anything that I need to clarify, or if anything I didn't go in as in depth in pertaining to this particular topic. Feel free to leave me a comment. If you're brand new to the channel, hit that subscribe button and bell icon so when I make a new video, you'll be notified of it. And if there's anything else I can help you all out with, regardless if it's a anaerobic event like the mile or a 5K, or an aerobic event more like the half marathon or marathon distance, 10K distance, definitely reach out to me and I'll definitely do everything I can to help you all out. Talk to you all in the next video, and I wish you all the very best in your